Hannah brought her pain to God without pretending. Hannah did not break in a quiet corner where no one could see her. She broke after sitting at a family table where her wound had been turned into conversation, comparison, and quiet humiliation. The food was there. The worship trip was there. Her husband's affection was there. Peninnah's children were there. And Hannah was still expected to sit with her face arranged, her voice controlled, and her pain small enough not to disturb the room. That is where her prayer begins, not with polished faith, not with a beautiful sentence, not with a woman who had already made peace with everything. 1 Samuel 1:10 says Hannah was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. Scripture does not rush past the bitterness to protect her image. It lets us see the place where pain finally stopped performing for people and started becoming truthful before God. And maybe that is why Hannah still speaks so clearly to people who look fine in public but feel exhausted in private. Many believers do not stop praying because they no longer believe in God. They stop praying honestly because they have learned to edit themselves before they come near Him. Hannah teaches us something different. God is not only waiting for the grateful version of you, the patient version, the composed version, the version that can explain the ache without trembling. Sometimes the prayer that begins to heal you is the one you were almost ashamed to pray. So the real question is not whether your pain is too messy for God. The question is whether you have been making it behave in rooms where it was never meant to be healed, the table where pain had to behave. Hannah's pain had an audience before it had a voice. That is one reason her story cuts so deeply. Some wounds hurt not only because something is missing, but because other people keep standing close enough to notice the absence and far enough away to misunderstand what it costs. 1 Samuel 1 tells us that Hannah had no children, and Peninnah, her rival, provoked her grievously. The text says this happened year after year when the family went up to worship. That means Hannah's wound was not touched once and then left alone. It returned with the calendar. It sat at the table. It traveled with the family into a religious setting. It became part of a yearly rhythm that should have led them toward God, but instead reopened the same ache. You can almost hear the room before Hannah rises from it. The scrape of a dish against the table. Children leaning against their mother. Someone passing a portion. Elkanah giving Hannah a double portion because he loved her. And then Peninnah's voice, maybe not loud, maybe not dramatic, maybe wrapped in the kind of ordinary remark that lets everyone pretend nothing cruel just happened. That kind of cruelty can be hard to name. It does not always come with shouting. Sometimes it comes with a smile. Sometimes it hides inside a question. Sometimes it is the repeated reminder that someone else has what your heart has begged God for. And because the room keeps moving, because the meal continues, because nobody wants the atmosphere to change, the wounded person learns how to disappear while still sitting in plain sight. Pain has to behave. You learn the acceptable smile. You learn how long to look down before someone asks what is wrong. You learn how to swallow the sentence before it reaches your mouth. You learn how to make grief sound like tiredness, how to make humiliation look like patience, how to make a breaking heart seem reasonable. Then Elkanah asks, "Am I not more to you than 10 sons?" I do not think he is trying to be cruel. He loves Hannah. He sees her sorrow. He wants his love to be enough to lift it. But sincere love can still misunderstand. A good gift in one area does not erase a wound in another. Love beside you does not automatically silence the grief inside you. That is a lonely truth. It is lonely to be loved and still grieving. It is lonely to have blessings and still carry an ache people think your blessings should cancel. It is lonely when someone offers comfort, and you are grateful for it, but it still cannot reach the exact place that hurts. Many people know this without living Hannah's exact story. You can sit at a holiday table while people ask about the part of your life that has not changed. You can sit in church while others celebrate what you still long for. You can sit across from someone who means well but keeps giving answers to a pain they have never had to carry. I have smiled in rooms where honesty would have made the room too heavy. I have called it maturity when it was really fear. fear of being too much, fear of being misunderstood, fear that if I named the ache, someone would either rush to fix it or quietly judge me for still having it. Hannah's first act of faith was not a perfect prayer. It was that she rose. That small movement matters. She got up from the table. She did not wait for Peninnah to become kind. She did not wait for Elkanah to understand the depth of the wound. She did not wait until her face looked peaceful. She rose from the place where pain had been forced to perform for people, and she carried that pain toward the Lord. Sometimes prayer begins before language. It begins when you stop letting the wrong room decide what your wound is allowed to say. It begins when your soul admits, I cannot keep translating this pain into a version everyone else can handle. Hannah did not bring God a beautiful moment. She brought him the moment after beauty failed. And once she left the table, something sacred began. The pain that had been watched by people was about to be poured out before the prayer that refused to be edited. Hannah prayed in bitterness of soul. That phrase is important because it keeps us from cleaning her up too quickly. She did not wait until the bitterness was gone before she prayed. She did not soften the sorrow so it would sound more spiritual. She did not turn her wound into a neat sentence that could fit on a wall or comfort everyone listening. 1 Samuel 1:10 says she prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. The Bible is not embarrassed by that. We are often the embarrassed ones. We are the ones who think disappointment must lower its voice before entering prayer. We are the ones who fear that honest grief might sound like unbelief. So we edit. We say, Lord, I know you are good, and that may be true. But sometimes we use it to avoid saying, Lord, I am confused. We say, your timing is perfect, and that may be true, but sometimes we use it to avoid admitting, Lord, I am tired of watching other people receive what I still cannot hold. We thank God for our blessings, and we should. But sometimes gratitude becomes a curtain we pull over the one wound we are afraid to expose. Careful prayers are not always mature prayers. Sometimes they are frightened prayers. I have prayed careful prayers before, not because my heart was careful, but because I was afraid God would be disappointed by the truth underneath them. I wanted to sound surrendered before I had actually surrendered. I wanted to sound peaceful because I did not know what would happen if the ache spoke in its own voice. Hannah lets the ache speak. Her lips move. Her voice is not heard. Her body carries what words cannot fully carry. You can imagine her fingers gripping the edge of her garment, her shoulders trembling, the floor beneath her knees, the kind of crying that is no longer trying to look faithful. This is not religious performance. This is the body releasing what the soul has held for too long. Psalm 62:8 says, pour out your heart before him. Not polish it, not summarize it, not reduce it to the part that sounds acceptable. Pour it out. A poured-out heart is not tidy, it spills, it loses the clean edges, it admits what has been trapped behind the teeth. It tells God the whole truth, not because God does not already know, but because the soul needs to stop hiding from the one who knows and still receives. But Hannah does not simply pour pain into the air. She pours her soul before the Lord. That difference matters. There is a way to release pain that only spreads bitterness. We can rehearse the wound until it becomes our identity. We can keep replaying the sentence, rebuilding the scene, arguing with people who are not even in the room. We can turn the ache into a private courtroom where we are always both victim and judge. Hannah does something deeper. She does not deny the bitterness, but she does not enthrone it. She does not pretend the wound is small, but she does not let the wound become God. She brings the whole thing into the presence of the only one strong enough to hold pain without being ruled by it. That is the narrow road of honest prayer. Not pretending, not exploding, pouring. God is not fragile. He is not frightened by the contradiction inside you. He can receive a prayer where love and disappointment stand in the same sentence. He can receive gratitude that still has tears in it. He can receive words that are not ready to become a testimony yet. That is mercy, because many people are not distant from God because they are rebellious. They are distant because they believe only the edited self is welcome. The patient self, the grateful, the version that can quote the verse without trembling. Hannah's story interrupts that lie. The Lord does not wait at the door for the cleaned-up version. He receives the woman whose prayer is still wet with tears. But honest prayer often makes people uncomfortable. When pain stops performing properly, it may be misread. Hannah is about to learn that even in a sacred place, the human eye can misunderstand what God is already hearing. The holy place where she was misread. Eli saw Hannah's mouth, but he did not understand her prayer. That is one of the most painful turns in the story. Hannah had already been wounded at the table. She had already carried a grief people could see but not understand. Now she comes into the house of the Lord, the place where her soul should be safest, and even there she is misread. 1 Samuel 1 says Hannah was speaking in her heart, only her lips moved, and her voice was not heard. Eli watched her and thought she was drunk. Think about that for a moment. The one person in the room who should have been most prepared to recognize spiritual anguish mistook it for disorder. Her silent prayer looked suspicious to him. Her desperation did not fit the shape he expected. Her grief did not behave in a way he knew how to interpret. That still happens. People can misread your healing as distance. They can misread your silence as pride. They can misread your tears as weakness, your boundary as bitterness, your honesty as instability. Sometimes even religious people can misunderstand pain because it does not look the way they expected faith to look. That kind of misunderstanding can make a person shut down. It is one thing to be hurt by an enemy. It is another thing to be misread in the place where you came looking for mercy. The throat tightens differently there. The hands feel exposed. You wonder if maybe you should have stayed quiet after all. But Hannah does not disappear. She answers Eli with dignity. She says, "No, my lord, I am a woman troubled in spirit." She does not attack him. She does not pretend he was right. She does not reshape her pain to make him more comfortable. She tells the truth. "I have been pouring out my soul before the Lord." That sentence feels like a window opening. Hannah refuses to let Eli's misunderstanding become the final interpretation of her prayer. He saw her mouth. God heard her heart. Eli read the outside poorly. God received the inside fully. This is where many wounded people need to be strengthened. Being misunderstood by people does not mean you are unseen by God. A wrong reading of your pain is not the same as a divine rejection. Someone may misname what is happening in you, but the Lord is not confused by your tears. Psalm 34:18 says, "The Lord is near to the brokenhearted." Near. Not suspicious, not impatient, not waiting for the brokenhearted to explain themselves perfectly. Near. There is something deeply human in Hannah's response. She does not make a speech to prove herself. She simply tells the truth with enough clarity to remain present. That is a holy kind of strength. Not the strength of never breaking, but the strength of not letting someone else's misunderstanding erase the truth of what happened between your soul and God. I have noticed that pain often makes us want to hand the pen to whoever misreads us. One careless sentence, and suddenly we are trying to explain our whole life. One wrong assumption, and we feel forced to defend every tear. But Hannah teaches a quieter way. Tell the truth where it is needed. Then let God remain the deepest witness. Eli corrects himself. He tells her, "Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant your petition." The same mouth that misread her now speaks peace over her. Not everyone who misunderstands you will do that. Some will never come back and say it differently. But the heart of Hannah's story is not Eli's accuracy. It is God's attentiveness. Hannah came in with a wound people had been watching. She left with a peace people could not manufacture. And that peace did not come because the facts had changed. It came because the pain had finally reached its true destination. Her face changed because the pain had somewhere to go. Hannah left the place of prayer before she held the answer. That detail is easy to miss because we know Samuel is coming. We read her story from the other side of the miracle, but Hannah did not walk out of that place holding a child. Peninnah was still there. The household was still complicated. Her body had not yet changed. The years behind her had not been erased. And yet 1 Samuel 1:18 says she went her way, ate, and her face was no longer sad. That is not denial. It is not forced brightness. It is not the kind of religious performance that says, "I am fine," because everyone is more comfortable when the wounded person smiles. Something quieter happened. Her pain had somewhere to go now. Before Hannah prayed, the ache was trapped inside a closed system. Peninnah provoked it. Elkanah could not fully comfort it. The table exposed it. Silence contained it. Her own body carried it. The pain kept circling because it had no safe destination. Prayer did not instantly remove the ache, but it gave the ache a direction. It moved what had been trapped behind Hannah's face into the presence of God. It took the wound out of the private prison and placed it before the Lord. That can change a person before it changes a circumstance. You may know this in your body. Before honest prayer, the jaw tightens. The shoulders lift. The mind circles the same sentence again and again. You lie down tired, but the argument keeps moving inside your chest. You wake up and the old ache is already sitting beside you before your feet touch the floor. Then there are moments when you finally tell God the truth. Not the organized version, not the safe version, the whole thing. And even if nothing outside you moves, something inside loosens. Not because the grief disappeared, but because you are no longer doing the impossible work of holding it alone. Pretending says, "I am fine," because it is afraid of being seen. Prayer says, "I am not fine, but I am no longer alone with this." Those are not the same. We often judge prayer only by outcomes. Did the door open? Did the call come? Did the person change? Did the diagnosis improve? Did the answer arrive? If the facts remain the same, we assume nothing happened. But Hannah's first visible sign of grace was not Samuel. It was a changed face. Before the answer entered her arms, peace touched her countenance. Before the future changed, the burden changed location. Before the child was conceived, Hannah ate again. That small detail is not small. She ate. The woman who could not eat at the table now receives food without the same sorrow ruling her face. She is not pretending the wound never existed. She is no longer being held hostage by it in the same way. This is one of the quieter miracles of prayer. God may not answer every request in the timing or form we imagine, but He can meet the soul so deeply that the same room no longer owns the same authority. The same table may still exist. The same people may still speak. The same ache may still have a chair. But the wound no longer has to be the ruler of the whole body. God did not shame Hannah for needing. He did not ask her to become less human before giving her peace. He received the whole ache, and in His presence the ache lost part of its power to define her. That is not the end of her story. It is the turning point, because once the pain had been entrusted to God, the desire itself could be searched and purified. The son she asked for would not become a trophy against Peninnah or proof that Hannah was finally worth something. He would belong to the Lord from the beginning. The gift was not allowed to become her God. Hannah asked for a son. We should not make that vague. She did not pray in safe generalities. She named the desire directly. She brought God the exact place where hope could hurt her again. Specific prayer is vulnerable. "Lord, bless me" is real, but it can keep the wound blurry. "Lord, I long for this child," or this healing, this restored family, this reconciliation, this answer, this mercy. That kind of prayer places the ache on the table without fog around it. Hannah does that, but then she does something deeper. She vows that if the Lord gives her a son, she will give him to the Lord all the days of his life. At first, that can sound like bargaining, but the movement of her heart is richer than that. Hannah is not trying to make God easier to control. She is refusing to let the gift become the thing that controls her. She wants the son. She does not hide that. She does not pretend to be detached, but she wants him under God's ownership, inside God's purpose, held with open hands. That is where her prayer becomes more than a request. It becomes surrender. Many of our desires are not wrong. A child can be good. Marriage can be good. Healing can be good. Reconciliation, provision, work, purpose, restoration. These can all be good gifts. The danger is not always that we want sinful things. Sometimes the danger is that a good thing begins carrying a weight only God can carry. A gift becomes dangerous when we need it to prove we are loved. A gift becomes dangerous when we decide we cannot trust God unless He gives it. A gift becomes dangerous when the answer stops being something we receive from the Lord and becomes something we require before we will return to Him. Hannah's vow reveals desire being purified, not erased. She brings the ache fully, but she does not build a throne for it. She asks boldly, but her hands are already being opened. And later, those hands will tell the story. The same hands that trembled empty in prayer would one day carry Samuel back to the place where she had wept. She would place before the Lord the child she had longed for. That is not the ending of desire. That is desire finally learning how to worship. 1 Samuel 1:27-28 records Hannah saying that she prayed for this child, and the Lord granted her petition. Then she says he is lent to the Lord as long as he lives. Samuel is not treated as a prize to prove Peninnah wrong. He is not a trophy to repair Hannah's public image. He is received as a gift and returned as worship. That is a mature kind of healing, because healing is not only getting what once hurt to lack. Healing is being changed enough that the answer no longer has to become your identity. God gave Hannah a child, but He did not merely solve a private humiliation. He drew her pain into a larger story. Samuel would become a prophet in Israel. He would hear the Lord in a time when the word of the Lord was rare. He would stand at a turning point in the nation's life. Hannah could not see all of that when she was crying. She only knew the ache. But God was able to receive a woman's personal pain and weave it into a purpose wider than the pain itself. That does not make the pain small. It makes the mercy large. Still, Hannah's story is not a formula. It does not mean that every honest prayer will receive the exact answer in the exact form we ask. Scripture is not a machine. God is not manipulated by tears, vows, or intensity. Hannah's child was grace, not a technique. The point is deeper. Honest prayer brings the whole self before God, where desire can be held, searched, softened, and surrendered. The gift is safest when God remains God, so bring the desire fully, but do not worship it secretly. Name the ache, but do not let it name you. Ask boldly, but keep your hands open. Let the thing you want become a meeting place with God, not a throne that replaces Him. Hannah entered prayer with empty hands. Later, she received with grateful hands. Then she returned with open hands, empty hands, receiving hands, open hands. That is the shape of surrendered desire, and that is why her story does not end only with a child. It ends with a woman who stopped pretending, brought God the whole truth, and learned to hold even the answer as belonging first. Return to the table without the mask. Hannah's story began at a table where pain had to behave, and maybe that is where this has to meet you too. Not only in the sacred place, not only in the quiet prayer, but back at the table where the questions still come too quickly, where someone still does not understand, where the same ache may still have a chair beside you. The room may not change today, the people may not suddenly speak with tenderness. The answer may not arrive in your hands by morning. You may still have to pass the plate, wash the cup, drive home, answer the message, and live inside a life that has not yet become what you hoped. But you do not have to return as someone swallowing the whole wound alone. That is the gift Hannah leaves behind. Pain does not become holy because you make it smaller. It becomes surrendered when you bring it honestly into the presence of God. Not edited, not decorated, not performed, brought. So find the sentence you have been afraid to pray, the one without spiritual makeup, the one that catches in your throat because it is too honest to sound impressive. Say it beside the sink with water still on your hands. Say it in the car before you open the door. Say it with your Bible open and your voice barely steady. Then open your hands. Not because God is required to answer exactly as you imagined, but because the ache was never meant to be your private prison. Write this in the comments. I will bring God the whole truth. Let that be your seal today. A small sentence, a real surrender, a quiet refusal to keep performing pain in rooms where God is already waiting to receive it.